Hello, comrades. This is your brother Jamala, brother Soldier, and we're going to go ahead and do part 4 of the topic on courage, respect, likability within the context of the African struggle, and we're going to try to say a little bit about the Black African Church and its mission. So many times the Black African Church has taken any churches, no matter what affiliation it is, they've been taking the posture of ministering to the soul of man alone and preparing him for the life that is to come, preparing him for the kingdom of heaven. And that his soul is the most important. It says, whatsoever man, what does it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world, lose his own soul? So they use that scripture. That scripture is used often. And that the soul is the primary concern that God has. He's not really, it's almost as though that some of these churches mention that he's not really concerned about the natural needs of man. And then you have some ministers that have these prosperity messages that speak about God is concerned about you having some kind of riches on earth. And they preach these prosperity messages. But as for this platform, I try to make it clear in the beginning that we want to serve the whole, cater to the whole man, and it's not religiously exclusive, meaning that I'm not going to exclude people who share different faiths. I want you to benefit from the political, socioeconomic information more than anything, as far as our struggle and our self-determination and our ability to be free, thriving human beings. So I want that to be the thrust, and at the same time give an honor and service to God. Now, I myself personally, I mentioned that my spiritual orientation is toward the Christian faith, along with the charismatic line. So that is my push, but I've always had an interest in serving mankind because of the struggles I've had as a black man growing up, and the struggles that our people have had as African people. I've accepted my African identity years back. I've accepted it, and so that is the way that I'm gonna go. I won't waste your time with this until I get to a rap session that I'll have with you, and I'll go on from there. But let me read a scripture here out of the book of Luke. And this scripture here in the book of Luke is speaking about basically the function of the church, but Jesus Christ was on the scene, and this is in the 4th chapter of Luke, verses 16 through 19. And I'm not gonna, let me see here. Well, let's start with verse 18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And in this particular scripture he wrote, he was in the synagogue. And then there's some other things that took place within this same chapter I thought were very interesting, that they were happy to hear that, but then they were upset when he taught about some other things that he felt that the Jews did not measure up to, and how they kind of rejected many of the prophets that had come. to speak. So in this day and age, we have um, men of God that come, men of God that are rejected. We have women and men that try to stand up for what's right and they're rejected by their own people. So he that hath the ear, let him hear. He that hath eyes to see, let him see. So we were talking about, going to this lesson, we were talking about the different kinds of worldviews that those of African descent could have, particularly in the diaspora. And we talked about how those views could be dangerous in going against each other. One wants to change the system in order that it will serve all of us, everybody, no matter what their racial makeup is. And then one doesn't want to take that fight up. He wants to leave it alone because he doesn't want to deal with the reprisals and the punishments and the blackballing that comes out of the system. So a lot of times, I was saying in the last video that people a lot of times often say that racism doesn't exist. Now, I may not have given some good examples in part 3, but I'm going to eventually come and give you some good, nice examples. Most of the racism and discrimination is covert and is very hidden. It's institutionalized. Two kinds of racism that exist. And if you want some references, I'm going to give you a reference to Black Power in the Politics of Liberation by Stokely Carmichael, and I believe it was written in 1967. Take a look at that book and how he talks about what racism and integration represent. And then there's another book that I use for these psychosocial worldview orientations by it's called Counseling the Culturally Different, or Counseling the Culturally Diverse. When I had the book back in '98, it was Counseling the Culturally Different, but they've upgraded it, and now it's called Counseling the Culturally Diverse. And it's by Sue and Sue. I believe how you spell their name is Suesue. So if you want to get more about that Uncle Tom stuff that I was talking about that came out of the books, that's the reference that I'm going to give you. And the scriptures, of course, when I quote from the scriptures, I'll try to provide you with references so you can go back and study on your own. And then should you have questions, you can go from there, and maybe we can answer it on the platform. But the bad thing about those worldviews, you have to look at part 3 of this topic in order to know what I'm talking about, because this being part 4, I don't want to waste a lot of the time trying to recap on that. But one thing that happens is that the dominant race will many times remove the individual, the African individual that seeks to voice concerns about discrimination in their department. They will retaliate sometimes and remove that person, and they will replace them with the one that doesn't fight, the one that placates, and the one that seeks to assist them in oppressing their own people. So these are things that happen. It's almost like a miniature coup d'etat, but it's on a corporate job level as opposed to like it is in the continent, where nations overthrow. People within a certain nation will overthrow the existing power militarily. So it's the same remove and replace. The same puppet thing that we see on the continent is similar to the puppetry we see on in the diaspora. In the diasporas, you will see marginalized and what you call impoverished communities that are not really ran by the Africans, the Black Africans there. It's usually legislated, dictated, and ran by the dominant power. Even if there's a black face on it, it's still ran by the dominant power. The curriculums are still exclusive. of African presence. The economic situation there is deplorable. You have hardly no factories and no places where to work there, no immediate jobs. Crime is high, and they're like small colonies, like just like is in the African continent. You used to have those colonies, and where people were colonized with it, and they were ran by people other than their own race. And that's a similar situation you have set up in the diaspora. But a lot of times that becomes too obvious, and they do what is called indirect rule, where they put the kind of African, the kind of black African that has the mind like they do, and they put them in the position and keep running the same program, running the same oppressive programs. So keep that in mind, because we can remember I said this is not very detailed, but it's going to be like highlighting, and it's not exhaustive of everything. It's just primer, just going over these things so we can get to a deeper topic and spend all day on it when I am allowed to have more time on these sites without breaking them up into smaller sessions. But anyway, I think I need no more than 15 minutes, because I'm a very long-winded individual and I don't want to wear you out. So I'm trying to be, sensitive to that. So anyway, these are the things that happen. They team up, and they continue the oppression. And the oppression doesn't have to be unemployment. It could be underemployment. It doesn't have to be underemployment. It could be marginalized on the job. It could be ignored. You could just be ignored. You could be not promoted for 10 years. You could be not promoted for 5 years. You could not get a good raise. Or they may see you with a raise and take your money from you and tell you if you don't like it, you can leave. And they may not do it to all black Africans. They may do it to you, because you're the one that want change. And they will put them who keep their mouth shut in your place, but it still hasn't changed the situation. So this is the kind of discrimination that goes on in the U.S., in the North America, and it probably goes on in the continent as well, with tribalism. People being preferable to a particular political group, a particular economic classism. So you have all of these things that could represent exploitation. And the key thing I want you to drive home that I got that Stokely Carmichael mentioned in his book, and a couple of other manuals or documents, one called Black Power in the Third World, and he talks about exploitation being mainly when you exploit a person of your own race, or you oppress people within your own race and deprive them. So they say there's a lot of white European poor people in North America, and that's true. So there's that exploitation. But then when you oppress members of a different race, especially in the diaspora of North America, where they have been taken away from their own language, their culture, their way of life and customs, and they've been in their own way of being educated, and you have assimilated them into what some sellout, what you call Black Africans would think is idea. They think that the other culture is better, so they'll serve that. But then you take the Black Africans from the massive of people from their original land base and change them, they're assimilating into the power structure, the European white power structure, at the expense of losing their identity and who they are. So when those people decide to reclaim their identity and begin to stand for it, then there's a fight there. And then there's when the powers of resistance, not resistance, the powers of oppression intensify. So I don't have any time right now. My time is out, but I'm just trying to give a spiel of that. I will say more about the church in the next one because I think that's important. So anyway, thank you for joining us. If you like it, hit a thumbs up. Hotep.